Good morning, everybody. As y'all are coming in, hopefully this live will last, at least on TikTok. We're in two places right now. We are live on TikTok and also on Instagram. As y'all are coming in, you can shout yourselves out in the comment section. Are we live on TikTok? I don't see a number here, but hopefully we're live on TikTok. Now don't restrict me. TikTok has restricted my live like 5 days in a row, and for inexplicable reasons, I don't even know why they've done it, but they have done it like 5 days in a row. So hopefully this populates on TikTok and it actually works. It looks like it's working for now. And on Instagram, they haven't restricted me, at least not yet. Maybe they will as of today, but we'll see. But what we're going to talk about here today, I think everybody can read what it says. What we're going to talk about here today is racism. I'm going to talk about just my general thoughts on the concept because a lot of people are always talking about it. It's always a topic. Race is always a topic, and especially in the United States of America. And given what is happening socially right now with Kamala Harris, apparently is going to be the nominee for the Democrats for the upcoming presidential election, even though she didn't actually win the nomination, but it looks like she's going to be the nominee. Maybe we'll talk about that on another day, maybe not today, but she didn't actually win the nomination, but people have just assumed that she's the nominee. Whatever. And because she is black, or at least she's black now, because that'll serve her for winning the election. It'll serve her for getting black people to vote for her, and we all know this is true. And she's been black since 2019 when she decided to run for president. But before that, she was more pushing her Indian side, and now she's picking the black side. I ain't mad at her for doing it. I mean, the hustle is the hustle. The game is the game, folks. This is something that I say all the time. So what I'm going to talk about here today, since this is something that's always an issue, I'm going to give you my general thoughts on this whole thing about racism, what I think about it, how I feel about it, what I think about it when it comes to me being a black person, you, if you are not black, how people are talking about it, what people are saying about it, and what you could or should do about it. All right, that's what we're going to talk about here today. Before I get into that, introducing myself, for those who don't know me, my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day. I'm a former 9-year professional athlete. I'm author of 35 books. I've done 4 TEDxTalks. I've created this brand called Work on Your Game. What we do here is we extract the tools, strategies, the mindsets, and the systems that help athletes reach the top of the sports game. We translate those over to the business game. So let's talk about this. When it comes to racism, first of all, make sure we're all on the same page. So any of you who is not familiar with me or my work, I want you all to understand the way that I try to break things down and talk about them. I try to be as objective as possible. No human being can be completely objective because we all look at things through the lens of our own paradigms and our own subjective experiences. But at the same time, I try to be as objective as a human being can be. Even though I do have opinions. I have opinions, but I also try to be objective. And I'll let you know when I'm giving you an opinion versus when I'm giving you something that is just an objective observation, the truth. So first of all, let's get clear on the definition of the word racism. And this is one that a lot of people don't even know. A lot of people don't understand this. And because it's been so twisted up and misused over the years, especially over the last, let's say, 15 years, a lot of people don't even understand this definition. And everything I'm going to talk about here today is going to be based on this foundation of this definition. Definition of racism, this is straight out of the dictionary, folks, is the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to another. That is a definition of racism. That's how the word is defined. And notice, and here's the key thing I want you to get out of that definition, is the word belief. Racism is a belief, i.e. a way of thinking. That is what racism is. Racism is not a behavior. Racism is not an activity. There's no such thing as a racist activity. Now, I'm not saying that someone may not do something based on their racism, but there's no such thing as a racist activity. There's no such thing as a racist outcome. There's no such thing as a racist policy. There's no such thing as a racist institution. That is not possible by definition. You can't have a racist action because racism is based in thoughts. It is not based in deeds. Now, that does not mean, again, a thought can lead to a deed, but the deed itself cannot be racist. That's impossible. And Mr. Ibn Kendi, who wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist, some of you may have read it. If you haven't, you should read it because that book has informed a whole lot of people's thoughts on racism that they don't even understand what they're talking about. But that book was so popular and influential that many people adopted his mindsets and his frameworks, which are complete garbage. But they've adopted this stuff and it's infiltrated a lot of our institutions, corporate, government, and academia. He claimed that any institution that produces an outcome that he deemed racist, i.e. a disparate outcomes between different races, that means that the institution itself is racist or the policy is racist. In other words, if there's a school and the black kids get worse grades than the white kids, then what he claimed, this is in his book, you go read it yourself. He claimed that that means that the policies and the organization that led to those disparate outcomes between the black kids and the white kids is racist. The school itself is racist. The teachers are racist, and the tests that they were given are racist because the outcomes between the black kids and the white kids are not the same. That is literally in this man's book. I did not make that up. And in additional future printings of his book, what they did is they went and they changed some of the language in that book. That all is 100% fact, and any of you can verify that if you've read the book. I'm giving all of that as a foundation to help you all understand that people are playing around with these words in order to basically bamboozle you and trick you into thinking the way that they're thinking. So aside from a person admitting that they are racist, if a person comes out and tells you, hey, I don't like white people, or I don't like black people, or I don't like Asians, or whatever race that a person just comes out and just says that they don't like them, racism cannot be proved. It is impossible to prove racism when it's based in thinking, because it is impossible for any human being to read the mind of another human being. Therefore, it is impossible to prove racism. And everything I'm going to talk about from this point forward is based on this foundation. You cannot prove that a person is racist unless they admit themselves that this is the way that they think, because you cannot read another person's mind. Therefore, you can't tell someone that they're racist, because racism is a belief. It is not an action. Racism is not an outcome. It is not an action. It is not a system. It is not a policy. It is not a process. It is a thought. Again, by definition, and the dictionary still matters. One of the biggest challenges we're having in society these days is people changing the definitions of words to basically fit whatever point that they want to make. All right, that's nonsense. It's garbage. You can't do that. And this is the reason why, again, any of you who's familiar with my work, if you're not, and you become familiar with my work, you will understand that anytime that I'm talking about a subject that many people, maybe you have heard of it, but let's say you've heard of it, but you want to hear what I want to say about it, I usually will give you a definition of the term, because everything I'm going to talk about is based on that definition. And when we're all on the same page as far as what words mean, now we can have a conversation. But if you think racism means this and I think racism means that, then we're having two different conversations at the same time. So of course we're going to see things differently. We can't agree because we can't even agree on what a word means. So the arbiter of what words mean is called the dictionary. It is not me, it's not you, it's not some professor, it's not the government, it's not the president, it's not some person with no credibility or qualifications. It's the dictionary. Dictionary tells us what words mean. And if your thesis or point that you want to make does not jibe with what the dictionary said a word means, then your thesis is incorrect. It's inaccurate. It needs to be based on what is accurately true. And we have come to agree in society that the dictionary defines words. So you cannot change the definition of a word to make yourself right. You need to change your argument to fit what is actually objectively accurate. So someone said, do I think the word racism is overused as lost much of its meaning? Yes, and the reason why is because people have redefined the word to mean whatever they want it to mean so they can make their point. Again, if Ibram X. Kendi, who became very popular and pulled in a lot of money based on his redefinition of the word racism, had he used the proper definition out of the dictionary, his book would not even have been published, because his whole book was based on his own made-up definition of the word. The book couldn't exist without that made-up definition. If you just knock down that made-up definition, that's the entire foundation of his whole business, his career, and everything that he's about. If you knock that down, then everything else falls apart. The whole book falls apart if you just kill that part right there. It's kind of like the foundation of a building. It's a high-rise building I can see out my window. It's 50 stories high. If the foundation of the building is pulled out from under it, the whole building falls apart. Ibram Kendi's entire career is based on a false definition of the word racism that he made up, and nobody fact-checked him on it. And if you take that away, then his whole career falls apart. But nobody fact-checked him on it. I wonder why. And let me tell you something else since I'm on the subject. I have written books. You see these books behind me on the shelf. I have worked with publishers, traditional publishers, where you're going back and forth and they have the big offices and these people work in corporate. I work with these people. When you put things in a book, I'll give you an example. This book right here, called Work on Your Game. This book was published by McGraw-Hill Education. It is a business-focused book. It's published by McGraw-Hill. They fact-check you in the book. So when I sent the manuscript in for this book, I wrote it in Google Docs, and I sent a manuscript in to my editor to look at the book. You know how many different rounds of editing that we did? We did like 20 rounds of editing. And what they do is they have a person who's known as I believe is the copy editor. And the copy editor goes through every word in your book and every claim that you make, everything. If you say if I say something in my book like Magic Johnson said this, right? They will go and check and make sure that Magic Johnson actually said it. And if I got the quote wrong, or I'm kind of misquoting him, they will come back and say, well, he didn't quite say it that way, so you got to fix that. Or if I say, well, if I know a percentage, I say 85% of people do this, they will fact check and say, what's your source for that? And they will make sure that you actually have footnotes that cite any source that you claim. Anything that you claim in a book, when you go through a traditional publisher, they fact check every single thing that you say. So you can't just say anything and publish it in a traditionally published book and get away with it. Now, if you self-publish a book, you can say whatever you want. I'm bringing all that up to say this. Ibram Kendi's book is traditionally published, which means he went through editing the same way that I went through editing for my book. And when I said things, they fact checked me and pushed back and said, well, do you have the data to support what you're claiming here? Because if you don't, then we got to take that out. And if you do, then we got to put it as a footnote. Ibram Kendi made up a definition of racism, and nobody at his publishing company said, well, that's not what the dictionary says, Mr. Kendi. How are you going to put that in a book? Nobody said that. Do you wonder why? And then you got a theory as to why nobody checked him on that. I'll tell you why. Because they knew that book would sell a whole lot of copies if they allowed him to push that. Because again, and also whoever his copy editor was, and these are pretty smart people. My editor was really smart, very sharp individual. Here's the thing. They understood that, hey, if we question him on this, the definition of racism, then the entire book is invalidated. But if we don't question him and let this book put this book out, well, we're going to sell a whole bunch of books. We're going to make a whole lot of money. And this is the part that a lot of people don't understand. And I want you all to understand that what you are told and what is shown to you, especially by bureaucratic organizations, government, academia, corporate America, and publishing companies are corporate. All right. They have agendas that you don't know about. They have hidden agendas that you got to look layers deeper to understand what's actually happening, not what they're telling you. What they're telling you is often some nonsense, especially when they're talking on a polarizing topic such as race. So everybody understands here the foundation of what the word racism means. It comes out of the dictionary. It does not come from what you think. It doesn't come from what somebody else said. You cannot redefine a word out of the dictionary. You go by the definition the dictionary says, and if your worldview or your theory does not match what the dictionary says, then your theory needs to be edited. You don't edit what the dictionary says. All right, that's not the way that it works. So racism is a thing that can only be accused, that cannot be proven. All right, everybody understand that. You cannot prove that somebody's racist. That's impossible. Only way you can prove someone's racist is if they say, yes, I am racist, or yes, I hate black people, or I hate white people, or I hate Asian people, or I hate whatever group they want to hate. Unless they admit it, then you cannot prove that someone's racist, because racism is based in thinking. It is not based in activity. There's no such thing as a racist action. There is no such thing, again, by definition. Moving on to point number 2. We're talking here today about racism in general. I'm just giving my general points on it. Someone over on TikTok said, racist is any person who participates in or benefits from racism. No, that is false. That is not what racism is. And again, you got that from, that's the Ibram Kendi definition of racism. And he, again, I just told y'all, the book was very popular. And because he was so popular, his book, his theories, and all those things became so popular, many people came to believe this convoluted definition of racism. That is not what the definition of racism is. Look it up in the dictionary. That is not what it says. Point number 2. So here's the question, because people will listen to this and they'll hear me saying this and they'll say, Dre, well, you're a black guy living in America. You work you're in the business space. You've been an athlete. I mean, you talk to people, you're outside doing things. Don't you experience, or don't you deal with people who might be racist, or maybe they could be racist? And the neighborhood that I live in, where I live, it ain't a ton of black people. It's a bunch of Latin people, a bunch of Europeans, a bunch of white people. Don't you think racism might happen? Do you feel like sometimes, Dre, that when you go outside, you're getting profiled or prejudged, or people are looking at you differently because you happen to be a black guy walking around a place where there's not a ton of black people? I mean, it's plenty of black people, but it's not a ton of us. It's not like I live in a black neighborhood. Does this happen? That's a question somebody asked. Or Dre, do you ever experience what they call microaggressions? Do any of these things ever happen? The answer to the question is yes. And first of all, let me address that microaggression thing, by the way. Any of you dealing with this? Microaggressions are for pussies, females, and children. All right, I don't care about microaggression. I don't even register microaggressions. All right, if you're a man and you're registering microaggressions, you're a pussy. All right, I don't care about microaggression. I respect macroaggression. I respect direct aggression. So if you're a microaggression, what is a microaggression? Like somebody giving you a dirty look, or like making a face? I don't even register when somebody does something like that. That's not for men. Microaggressions are for women and children. I don't care about a microaggression. Now, if you work in the corporate space where you gotta be nice to people and pretend to like somebody who you don't like, just so you can go along and get along, I get it. If that's the the environment that you're involved in, but I'm not involved in those environments. So I don't care about that. I don't care about microaggressions. I'm not worried about a dirty look or somebody not holding the door for me or none of that bitch ass shit. Those are for females and kids. I don't send microaggressions and I don't look for microaggressions. If I have an issue with someone, I will be direct aggressive, not microaggressive. But anyway, so does this happen? Do I get profiled and prejudged and looked at differently by certain people because I'm black and they're not, and maybe they have a certain pre-frame about who black people are or how black people are or something they saw on TV or the internet? Do I believe that this happens? The answer is yes. Now, do I know for sure that it's happening? The answer is no, because that would require me to read another person's mind, which is impossible. I cannot read your mind. You cannot read my mind, nor can any of us read another person's mind. So you can't accuse, or you can accuse, but you cannot come to the conclusion. You cannot conclude that a person is doing something because of race unless they confirm it and verify it to you. So if you walk into a place, there's a bunch of white people. If you're black, there's a bunch of white people in the room, and they all kind of give you a dirty look. You cannot conclude that they're doing it because you're black. You can assume, you can accuse, but you can't know for sure that that's the reason they're doing it. Maybe they're doing it because they didn't want anybody to come in. Maybe they don't like your clothes. Maybe they know something about you that has nothing to do with your race that made them not like you. Maybe it's because they're racist, but we don't know. All right, we can't draw that conclusion. And anyway, here's the bigger point. Who cares? What if they are giving you a dirty look because you're black? So now what you going to do? Call the cops? What are you going to do? You going to file a lawsuit? So here's the thing you need to understand. Racism is legal. Racism is not a crime, ladies and gentlemen. And this is especially important for you black folks and you white people who call yourselves allies or whatever the hell that means. All right. Racism is legal. People are allowed to be racist. In the United States, at least, you are allowed to be racist if you want to be. You are allowed to be a bigot. You can hate a certain group. You can hate Jewish people. You can hate Asians. You can hate black people. You can hate white people. You can hate women. You can hate men. You can hate whatever you want to hate, whenever you want. And you can even say it out loud if you want to. All of that is legal because in the United States, the First Amendment protects our right to free speech. Now, there are some limits to free speech. As they say, you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. But generally, you can speak out against the government. You can speak out against a religious group. You can speak out against a racial group. You can speak out against a gender group. You can speak out against anybody you want, and you are 100% free to do so. Even if I disagree with you, I protect your right to do so. So if someone comes on a live here and says, well, I hate all black people, including you, Dre, I might delete them or block them off of here because I don't want them saying it in my live. But do they have the right to say it? Absolutely, they do. That's what the First Amendment protects. Everyone has the right to share whatever opinion they want. You don't have to listen to them if you don't want to. You don't have to hang with them if you don't want to. You definitely don't have to agree with them, but you do not have the right to block them from using their right to say what they want to say. You cannot block a person from saying what they want to say. This is the problem I have with cancel culture. It's people getting canceled because they said something that makes other people uncomfortable or that other people disagree with. That's nonsense. Everyone has the right to say whatever they want. You don't have to like it, but they do have a right to say it. And you should not ever, none of you should ever be participating in anything that says, let's not let this person speak because we don't like what they say. So for example, you see this happening on college campuses all the time. I don't know if any of you is in college right now or works at a college or is recently getting out of college, let's say in the last like 5 years. Because this wasn't happening when I was in college. I graduated college exactly 20 years ago. But what's happening now is that let's say somebody that's controversial. Let's say Candace Owens, right? Candace Owens is black and she is very publicly known as she's a conservative. She's an announced conservative Republican black person. And she's very articulate and she's very strong on her points. And she will, let's say her, for example, she's booked to go speak at a college, some liberal university, and then a bunch of people who don't like her, they will protest before she gets there and says they shouldn't allow Candace to speak because the things that she says are hateful and she's anti-Semitic and she's this and she's that. And what's happening is, I'm just using her as an example, that the school will capitulate to this and cancel her speech and not let her come speak because they got pressured by the students to not let this person come speak because the students don't like the fact that she has some opinions that they don't like. This is nonsense. And this is happening on college campuses where students are supposed to be taught. This is supposed to be an institution of higher learning, which means the students are supposed to be expanding their worldview, not constricting it. Meaning they should be hearing and learning things that will challenge them to think not telling people what to think. And colleges are doing the exact opposite of this. This is why universities are a scam these days, and the costs are going up. Most of the professors there are, again, just indoctrinating you with what they think and what they want you to think. And now the students are buying into it. When I was in school, if someone was coming to the campus that was speaking about something that I staunchly disagreed with, I want to show up and sit in the front row because I want to make sure I understand exactly where they're coming from and why. I'm not going to cancel. I don't want to stop them from talking. I want to hear exactly what they got to say, because maybe they have some things to say that might change my opinion. Maybe I don't quite understand where they're coming from. Maybe I only heard about them out of context. Maybe I only saw clips on TikTok. So now I think I know what they're about, but I didn't hear their entire context. And now I better understand what they're saying. And maybe I got some questions for them that when they answer them, now I'm like, okay, now I get it. But if I block them from speaking, now I don't learn anything. This is what people are doing these days. And that's wrong. That's not the way it's supposed to go. And unfortunately, this is what's been happening. There's a book called The Coddling of the American Mind. The author's name is Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. If y'all haven't read that book, y'all should read it. It's called The Coddling of the American Mind. And he talks a lot about how this starts on college campuses, because the people who graduate from college, what happens to us? We go on and get into the workforce, and then they become the people working in government and in corporate America. They're the ones who are making these rules. And most of the people who are working in academia, for example, were really good students in college. So where'd they learn this nonsense? They learned it in school. And now they go back and work at the school, and they're teaching to the next wave of kids. So this is what's happening. So this whole point here, does racism exist? Could somebody be racist towards me as a black man living in America? And I don't live in a black neighborhood. Could people be racist towards me or have some racist thoughts about me because of who I am and what I look like? The answer is absolutely yes. Do I care? No. Now, if they do something, then I will respond to what they do. But if they're just thinking it, well, what am I supposed to do about that? I can't read your mind. I don't know what you're thinking. I walk past a white person and I say good morning, and they look away and don't say good morning back. What am I supposed to do? Call the police? Should I make an Instagram post about it? What does it matter? And this is what I mean when I say coddling of American mind. We have created a society of weaklings. And I'm talking specifically to you black folks. We created a society of weaklings, of you all running around looking for microaggressions and looking for ways to accuse people of racism just so you can feel like a victim, and then you can get a pat on the back from everybody else, like, yeah, all these racist people out here. All right, this is nonsense. And the people who do this the most, I call them race hustlers. People who build a business around this, I call these people race hustlers. All right, Mr. Kendi is a prominent race hustler. Last I read, his whole situation was falling apart because he's not a good leader. He got put into a leadership position he was not ready for. But he is a prominent race hustler. And when I call someone a race hustler, I'm not saying that as a pejorative. I'm saying it as a compliment. Because if you can make money from just looking for and pointing out quote unquote racism, that's a great business. All right, if you can make it work, he's done a great job of it. And there's a bunch of race hustlers, miniature race hustlers out there following his lead. But anyway, let me move on. As I said, I don't care about microaggressions. That's for females and children. No man walks around looking for microaggressions. That doesn't even make sense. And nor do we send them out. Okay, so we all have a unique set of circumstances from which we see things. And some of you have had situations that have colored your perspective that you are super sensitive to, and I understand that. I respect that. Everyone has their own paradigms based on our experiences. Question is, I don't care about the challenge is, question and the answer is, I don't care about anyone possibly thinking or having some racist energies or thoughts or ideas about me, because that doesn't do anything to me. Now, again, if someone does something, then I'll respond to it. But just thinking it, I can't read your mind, so I don't care what you're thinking, nor am I trying to figure it out. And again, let's remember the definition of racism. It is a belief. It is not an action. There are no such things as racist actions or outcomes or institutions or programs, etc. You can say that they are race-based, because there are plenty of things that happen in the world that we can say are race-based. So slavery itself, was slavery racist? I would say slavery was race-based. It was based on, okay, we believe these black people are not as worthy as us, so we're going to enslave them and make them do things for us and not pay them. All right, is that race-based? Yes, it is. Is it racist? Technically, no. By definition, it's not. I'm not saying it's not racist. I'm not saying the people who did it didn't have probably racist ideas and racist thoughts. They probably did. I think most of us can probably agree on that. But there's no such thing as a racist action. Again, I'm going by definition. This is the reason I gave you definition up front. Point number 3. We're talking here today about racism in general. Here's what I think about all of it, everything together. All right. Are there bad people? And by the way, I'll answer questions at the end. And this is my last point. Are there bad people out there? Are there people out there who, let's say, if you consider racism to be bad, are there people out there who are actively racist? Yes. And some of them are black, by the way. Oh, yeah. Let me talk about this since we're on the subject. Because I hear people saying this nonsense. They say black people can't be racist because racism is based in power. First of all, bullshit. And secondly, no, it's not. Can black people be racist? Absolutely, they can be racist. Racism is a way of thinking based on a belief that your race is better than another based on race, or that another race is worse than yours just based on race. Can black people be racist? Absolutely, black people can be racist. And many black people are very racist. And many of you have been trained to be racist. The same way white people get trained to be racist, you got trained to be racist. And no, you do not need to have power to be racist. Racism is a way of thinking. It has nothing to do with how much power you have. You could be the weakest person in the room and still be a racist. There's no such thing as the word power does not appear in the definition of the word racism. And you got to be careful where you're getting your definitions from, because specifically Google is guilty of this. They change up definitions of words just to fit whatever's going on in society. So they changed the definition of the V word. I'm not even going to say it here because they might restrict my live. Y'all know the V word, that jab that you were getting in your arm a couple of years ago. They changed the definition of that word when people started saying, yo, that V didn't actually do what it was supposed to do. How people are still getting the virus after they got the V word. That doesn't make any sense. So Google went and changed the definition of the word so that people didn't feel stupid for taking that shot. But anyway, get your definitions from like the Oxford Dictionary or something that doesn't keep changing things up to fit whatever's going on. But anyway, as I said, point number 3, someone being racist is their business. That ain't my business. You cannot police thinking. You cannot police thinking. All right. You cannot police the way a person thinks. Therefore, since racism is a way of thinking, you can't hold someone accountable for their thoughts. You can hold someone accountable for their words and for their actions, not for their thoughts. And racism is a thought. So you cannot do anything to someone based on racism. Another thing, there are no safe spaces in real life. College campuses is another thing that didn't exist when I was in college. I don't know any of you who's recently in college that y'all have safe spaces now. There's a place where you can go if you're gay or trans or black or female or whatever group is allegedly marginalized. And there's a space that only people like you can go. And there's a place where you can be safe and nobody will say anything you don't want to hear. Nobody can do anything that you don't want to see. And you are safe in that space. Real life has no safe spaces. There are 0 safe spaces in real life. And if you have been indoctrinated into believing that there are some places in life where you can go where you will be quote unquote safe, meaning nobody will say or do anything that could possibly hurt or harm you. And what people have said is harm. Harm has been expanded wildly to mean a bunch of things, like some things that, again, sticks and stones. People just saying stuff that you don't like. All right, this is nonsense. If there's a safe space on your college campus, any of you who's in college right now, make it a point to never go there. All right, safe spaces are for people who are training themselves to be career weaklings and career victims. Victims get victimized. You see yourself as a victim, you will get victimized. Why? Because you're putting the energy out there that will attract the people who want to take advantage of you. And human beings naturally take advantage of people who put themselves in a position to be taken advantage of. So if you're walking around looking for safe spaces in life, people will take advantage of you even if they're not the bloodthirsty type, simply because you're making yourself available. That's how it is. This is just human nature. So when you observe that the less someone feels in control of their own success and the more of a victim they feel like, you'll notice that they get taken advantage of, as I just said. So the things that you don't control, like race, you don't control your race. You don't control the privileges that you or others have. You don't control luck. You don't control favoritism. You don't control the general inequities in society. Instead, what you should do is empower yourself. Empowering yourself is a way of thinking, the same way racism is a way of thinking. Same way you can spend your time focusing on what other people are doing that is racist, you can focus on what you are doing to empower yourself and make yourself strong enough that it doesn't matter if other people are racist. They can't stop you from being who you want to be. That's how empowered people think. Whereas weaklings, those of you who've been indoctrinated and you've been raised in safe spaces, incubated in safe spaces, you're walking around looking for, well, who's thinking something negative about me so I can feel like a victim. All right, you're setting yourself up to be a loser. You're setting yourself up to be a loser. All right, losers lose. And how do they lose? By habit. They lose by force of habit because they're looking for ways that they are already losing. Oh, these people are racist. This system is racist. The country is racist. Right. This is all loser language, and you're setting yourself up to continually lose. Now, I'm going to answer questions in a minute. So let me recap my 3 points here. We're talking about racism, just my general thoughts on the subject. First of all, definition of racism, for those who didn't catch it at the beginning. Racism is the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Key word in that definition, folks, is belief. There is no such thing as a racist action. There is no such thing as a racist institution. There is no such thing as a racist policy. There is no such thing as a racist outcome. Those do not exist by definition. Again, I use a dictionary to give you a definition of a term so that we're all on the same page. You cannot create your own definition of the word racism. Many people have been taught that they can. You cannot. And if we can't agree on what words mean, then we cannot communicate. And when human beings cannot communicate, what we get is chaos. You know what the end game of when human beings are trying to communicate but they can't? You know what happens? What happens is what's happening in the Ukraine right now. What happens is what's happening in Israel and Palestine right now is that we end up having war. War is the end game of a breakdown in communication. When people cannot communicate, eventually we go to war. And let me be clear on something. Black folks who are listening to this, you don't want a race war in America. If you are black and you are concerned about quote unquote white supremacy or MAGA or Trump supporters or whatever racism they got you scared about, you don't want a race war in America, black folks. You don't want a race war to happen in America. How black people going to win a race war when we are, 14% of the population? We don't have the leadership. We don't have the organization. We don't have the resources, and we don't have the ammunition. How are you going to win a war? All right, if there's a race war in America, black people will cease to exist. So y'all don't want a race war. I'm telling you that war is the end game of a lack of communication. So if you don't want to communicate in an objective way, then the end game is we go to war. We don't have the numbers to go to war, black folks. So y'all should be careful and instead understand what I'm explaining to you here. Again, this is straight out of the dictionary. I didn't make this up. This is not Dre's theory. This is the dictionary. Okay. And the dictionary does matter because the dictionary is an arbiter that tells us what words mean. And when we all agree on what words mean, then we have the ability to communicate. Challenge is many of you have been so deeply emotionalized on these subjects that you have lost your ability to think and look at things logically. Point number 2, do black people get profiled, judged, and looked at differently due to who you are? Probably. Yeah. All right. Question is, what you going to do about it? Are you going to call the cops? Racism is legal, folks. Bigotry is legal. Hate is legal. People are allowed to be these things. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying that you should. I'm saying it's legal, which means the First Amendment protects anyone's right to be hateful, racist, bigoted, whatever other term you want to throw out there. People are allowed to be these things. You don't have to like them. You don't have to hang with them. You don't have to listen to them on your space if you don't want to. You can block them off your Facebook if you want to, but they do have the right to say what they want to say and feel how they want to feel. And it's not a damn thing that you could. Well, there are things you can do about it. I would suggest you don't do anything about it. Let them be who they want to be. Because if their idea is wrong, the more it gets exposed, the more obvious it will be that it's wrong. This is the reason why the Civil War happened, because eventually enough people, white people in America said, well, we don't like this idea of slavery. Let's get rid of it. Now, had they just blocked, let's just say the white people in America back in the day, right, in the North, who didn't have slaves, or the people in the South who didn't have slaves, if they just said, we don't like these other white people who have slaves, we think they're wrong. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to block them and ignore them and never talk to them and never acknowledge that they exist. Well, guess what? We still be slaves. The fact that they allowed them to be exposed and shown doing the wrong thing is why eventually the support built up to get rid of the institution, because we saw it so often. But what if they just said, we're going to block them? We're not going to listen to them. We're not going to let them say it. We're just going to act like they don't exist. What would happen? Well, nothing would happen. We still have slavery. The fact that the bad idea got exposed is the reason that slavery got deleted. So this is why anytime you think someone has a bad idea and you really disagree with it, you should let them keep sharing it, because eventually the exposure of a bad thing eventually will lead to it being so exposed that it has to go away, because it's like, all right, that's really bad. That person's probably just going to stop talking. They're going to go away either on their own, or enough groundswell will be built up to eliminate them. So again, this is the reason why you shouldn't, you see somebody say something on social media that you really don't like, don't block them. Don't mute them. Let them keep talking. Because again, if it's a really bad idea, it'll be obvious. And here's the third point. When I think about all this, is there racism out there? Absolutely there is. All right. And the thing is, if you believe racism is, affecting you or trying to slow you down or stop you from being successful or holding you back in some way, you need to empower yourself first mentally, then tactically and strategically, such that it doesn't matter if other people are racist, you're going to be successful anyway. All right, successful people become successful regardless of what circumstances get thrown in front of them. And the more successful you want to be, the more things are going to be thrown your way anyway, so you need to get ready for it. There are no safe spaces in real life. Real life is not a safe space. The idea of a safe space is complete garbage. So any of you have been taught this, you got to wake yourself up and unlearn the nonsense that you learned at that liberal university that you're still paying bills from 30 years later, or that Joe Biden, what do you call it, relieved your debt? Different conversation for a different day. So let me recap. Take questions, rather. I already recapped. If you got a question or a comment, put it in the comment section right now. I saw a number of them come through on both. Let me look on IG first, and I'll go over to Real Deal Flora. What's going on? Good to see you. Now I'll look over to TikTok. So if you got a question or comment, put it in there. One Race Alliance, good morning. All these questions don't have nothing to do with if I'm not fertile soil for the seeds. What's the outcome? Exactly. David said, I don't get racism, brother. That poor lady who got shot, that's disgusting. Yeah, it was bad that she got shot, but that's what happens. So the trade-off of the fact that we had a Second Amendment, which allows people to bear arms, is that some people are going to use that right. They're going to use that right in a way that leads to outcomes that we don't want. But we cannot block people from having the right to bear arms just because somebody violated that right. But that person's going to go to jail. And the same way that we can't block free speech just because somebody might say something that you don't like. That is the trade-off. There are no perfect scenarios in life, folks. There are only trade-offs. Human beings are imperfect beings. So when you give human beings freedom to do things, some people will violate that freedom. That's just how it works. David says, I'm white, but I'm a feller baller. I don't know what that means. I know how the N-word people are. I don't know how the world end people are going. I don't know what you mean by that comment. All right. David says she wasn't shot because she was black, just because a black person gets shot. Yes, that's also true. Yes, so just because a black person gets shot by a white person doesn't necessarily mean it's because of race. And again, you can't read a person's mind. One race says safe space in black colleges are one and the same. Okay, fair opinion. And she said, let's do a clubhouse room. I don't really be on clubhouse like that much, but maybe. So let's see. I saw a comment at the bottom. Somebody said thoughts on Thomas Sowell's work. I like Thomas Sowell's work. I think he looks at things, again, similar to myself. He tries to be objective. I mean, he is human, so no human is completely objective, but I believe he tries to be objective. And I've read many of his books. I probably read maybe 4 or 5 of Sowell's books, but I got a bunch more that I do need to read. So I'm a fan of Sowell's work. I wish he was younger these days because he could knock down a lot of the nonsense that a lot of people push these days even better than I could. But I try to do my best. All right, so let's see. You got a comment on TikTok? Go ahead and post it, and I'm gonna respond to it. Someone said, "Do I think that the word is so overused of racism?" Oh, absolutely. It's not even that it's been overused. It's just that people have bastardized the definition of the word to the point that it's gotten overused. So if we go back to the actual definition, then that'll fix that issue, and that's what's happening. Comment is modern progressivism is built on redefining words and used as tools of action. Absolutely, that's 100% spot on. Progressivism is about redefining words and then using them as tools of activism. That's exactly what's happening. And that's mostly done by people who are, I guess you call them liberals or leftists. That's where it's coming from. Not a political statement, just the truth. Andrew said, pushing agenda. I define racism from an experienced view. I don't know what you mean by that. And then he says, racist is any person who participates and benefits from racism. No, that's not true. That is not the definition of racist. And you can't define it yourself. Dictionary defines words. Humans do not define words on their own. Dictionary defines words. And he said that may not be a definition, but what is the definition of that statement theist made? What is the definition of that statement? There is no definition of that statement. And again, we can't redefine words. That's the issue. That's the issue. The Kindle person, Ibram X. Kendi. His name, Ibram. His middle name is X, and his last name is Kendi. Kendi. They went and changed up a lot of the passages in that book after it got trashed by a bunch of people. But you should still read it. And say, again, we can't redefine words, folks. We can't read when we start redefining terms to match whatever we think. Now there's a breakdown in communication, and the end game of a breakdown in communication is war. And if you are black in America, you don't want a race war because we ain't gonna win. Bottom line. All right. So what people think about me is none of my business, none of my control. That's correct. Someone said racism is forever. Yeah, I already said that. I said racism is legal. So we're on the same page. Cosmo, who said that racism is a social construct that ensures the success of majority by. No, that's nonsense. Where'd you get that? What college did you go to that you got these definitions from? And what Ibram Kendi book are you reading? Somebody said, "Well, I have a sit down with Dr. Umar or Jesse Lee Peterson." I don't know who Jesse Lee is, but I do. I am familiar with Dr. Umar's work, and I find Dr. Umar entertaining. I don't agree with everything he says, but I do find him entertaining. I would absolutely have a sit down with him. I think we have a great conversation, and we would staunchly disagree on some things. I don't think either one of us would change our minds, but I think it would be an excellent conversation. Someone said the target of racism cannot participate in benefit, and yeah, you. What college? You should have a job at a university. This person who keeps leaving these comments. You sound like you to memorize the books. Charleston White. I don't know what me and Charleston White would talk about, but I have heard him a few times. I've heard him a couple of times. He's entertaining. I'm not sure how intellectual he is, but he's an entertaining guy. I haven't heard as much of his as I heard Mr. Umar. I gotta come up suited from now on. All right, that's what's up. You should. Uh, if you have no power, you don't impact me. Simple. Well, somebody can impact you. They don't have to have power to impact you. They can have power. Somebody can impact you by simply, I'll say if somebody's driving their car and they drive through a puddle and it splashes on you, does that impact you? They don't have to have any power. They just did something that affected you in some way. Somebody said use inoculation instead of the V word. I just call it the jab. The jab. Everybody knows what I mean when I say the jab, right? All right, so someone says systemic racism equals oppression. Yeah, well, nobody's oppressed. Who in America is oppressed right now? I don't think anybody. And theorist hypothetical says it's not reasonable for the criminal to define his crime in dismissive terms. I don't know what you mean by that. DG says it's not as black and white or cut and dry as you're trying to explain. What do you mean? What part are you referring to? You might have left a comment while I was still talking. But if I'm explaining something that comes out of dictionary, then it actually is black and white. That's why we have a dictionary, so that things are black and white and they're cut and dry and there's no gray area. That's the reason why we have a dictionary. That's the reason why I define terms, because it is absolutely black and white. There is no in between. And so, of course, one can be victimized without having a victim mentality. That's correct. So if I'm driving my car and somebody runs into the back of my car, I'm a victim of someone running into the back of my car, but I don't have to have the mindset of being a victim. So when I say victims, that's what I mean. I mean the mentality of being a victim, not a victim in fact. Like if I'm walking down the street and somebody just runs by and shoots me in the head, I'm a victim of somebody shooting. But that doesn't mean I have a victim mentality. So telling the truth doesn't mean you're a victim. It also doesn't mean that you have a victim mentality. Well, it depends on what you're referring to as a truth. So truth that's a tricky term. People call things the truth when it's not actually the truth. It's their version of the truth. But the challenge is there's no such thing as your truth or my truth. It's only the truth. So it depends on what truth you're referring to. You have to share with us what truth you're referring to so we can know if you're actually telling a truth or you're telling your truth. Those are two different things. Jess says there's 100% racist actions by definition. No, they're not. Depends on what definition you're going by. I'm going off the definition out of the dictionary. So not the definition from somebody's book. So where'd you get that definition from? Jess, FPV? Where'd you get that definition from? So we can see what you're talking about. So this is the reason why I gave that definition at the beginning of this live so that people understood this. So let me see. I'm looking up the Oxford Dictionary. Let's see if I can find it here. Because I had these in my notes already. What is this? Prejudice, antagonism, or discrimination by individual, institution, or society against a person or people on the basis of their nationality but it does not give me the rest of the definition. So these definitions keep changing. That's the issue. And that's probably one of the reasons why there's this conflict, even with things that people are saying here in the comments. So Google's definition, this is not Google. What is this? Wiktionary? These definitions keep changing. So it says a person who believes a particular race is superior to others. There you go, right there. Person with a prejudiced belief that one race is superior to others. So I'm on the DuckDuckGo browser, and that's what it says. Let me say it one more time. A racist. So this is not racism. This is racist. Let me look up racism, because that's the word that I used here. Racism. the belief that race accounts for differences in human character or ability, and that a particular race is superior to others. That's the definition of racism. And that definition is based on belief. You cannot read another person's beliefs. You only know someone's beliefs if they state them and they say them out loud. An action is measurable. Words are measurable. Thoughts are not. You cannot read another person's thoughts, and nor can you prescribe a thought to another person. So if a white person does something to you that you don't like, you cannot prescribe that they are racist because they did it. They might have did it just because they're a jerk. And they might have did it to a white person. You just happen to be black. Racism is a belief. It is not an action. It is not an outcome. All right, that is by definition and straight out of the dictionary. Someone asked, are these points from your book? No, these are not in my book. But maybe I will write a book talking about this. Actually, I know I'll write a book talking about this. As long as I'm allowed to write it, I will write a book talking about these things. But these are not in the book that I showed you. None of my books talk about these things in this way. DG says words on a page are not life. I don't know what you're referring to there. Hypothetical said, I reject Oxford, Webster, or any definition of racism since they dismiss the impacts. Well, yes, you sound like what do you do for a living, Hypothetical? You should be a college professor, so I hope you're not wasting your talent doing something else. So that's exactly what they're teaching at liberal universities these days, that you reject any dictionary. You reject the dictionary so you can make up your own definition that fits how you feel. That's exactly what they taught people. So whoever taught you well, and you should be out teaching other people. I'm kind of being tongue in cheek, but I'm not. All right, so segregation isn't racist by definition. That's correct. Jess, that's right. Segregation by definition, it is not racist. It is race-based. It's race-based because they said we're going to put these people over here based on race. We're going to put these people over here based on race. And again, you can accuse and we can theorize. I think we can draw a very strong theory that the people who created segregation were racist. And you can explain why you believe that theory. I agree with that theory. But by definition, it is not racism. It is not racist by definition. Again, I just read you the definition. So we fight with each other too much and don't own institutions or food supply. All right, you way going off the topic here. All right, I kind of disagree. Example, we're not talking dictionary, we're talking life experience. I'm talking dictionary. And DG said, you seem too stuck on words on a page. Well, the words on a page are known as the dictionary, and the dictionary is how we define what words mean. And when we agree on what words mean, DGs, then that means we can communicate. That's called society. So if we can't agree on what words mean, then we can't communicate. And when communication breaks down, the end game of a breakdown of communication is war. And if you're a black person, it looks up by your profile picture, you're a black person, you don't want war in America because black people don't have the resources, the leadership, the ammunition, or the numbers to win a war. I'm not saying that us disagreeing on the definition of racism is going to lead to a war. What I'm saying is you should understand and you should have you should respect the fact that the dictionary gives us a definition and not make up your own definitions of words, because the end game of that breakdown in communication is something that you probably don't want. And it looks like you're a female. If there's a war between men and women, you ain't going to win. I'm just telling you the truth. If I'm wrong, let me know. This is why I give definitions of words. So those of you who are not familiar with my work, or maybe you're only hearing me for the first time, when I talk about subjects that people have heard of, I make sure I define the word so that we're all on the same page, or at least you know what page I'm on when I'm explaining it. This is the reason why I use the phrase on the same page. I'm literally talking about words on the page, the G. So we are on the same page. The page is racism is defined as the belief that race accounts for differences in human character or ability, and that a particular race is superior to others. That is the definition out of the dictionary. You're saying you reject the dictionary because you have a different way of thinking. That is your prerogative, but that's not the way the world works. So if I say this tie that I'm wearing is pink and you say it's not pink, it's blue, because my life experience is that tie is blue, well, they would lock you away and put you in a straitjacket, or they carry you away to an institution. All right, I'm not stuck on words on a page. That's a definition. It's literally in a book. It's called the dictionary. You familiar with it? Okay, so anyway, racism is a social construct and ensures the success of majority by suppressing a minority. Hypothetical theorist, I was asking what you do for a living. Maybe I didn't get to your comment yet, but I'm hoping that you work at a university, because if you're not, you are wasting your talent. Or you should be writing books, something like that. You should be doing like what Ibn Kendi did. Life changes. What things mean in dictionary words are changed daily. No, they're not changed daily, and life does not change what things mean. No, it doesn't. I reject that. Ike does not change what things mean. A dollar 100 years ago still means a dollar today, and it will mean a dollar 100 years from now. And when we change definitions of things to fit our personal preferences, we get a breakdown in communication. So let's see. Someone said Black Wall Street. Wait, where am I at? I missed something. Oh, wait, they scrolled me down. I missed something. All right, so I'm looking at TikTok comments here. I'm just reading through the comments here on TikTok. So yes, Thomas Sowell, like him. Question, I answered that one. Do I think that any race can be racist? Absolutely. Anyone can be racist. I just gave you the definition of racism. Racism is about a belief. Anybody can believe anything they want. So a black person can be racist, a gay person can be racist, a trans person, an Asian person, anyone can be racist. Racism is not based on who you are. Racism is based on the way that you think. Denbis says, looks like I'm trying to sell books. Which book am I trying to sell? None of my books discuss this topic, so you're wrong. And secondly, even if I was trying to sell books, what you watching for? If you don't want to buy my book, don't watch the live. But I'm not trying to sell a book because none of my books discuss this topic. So you're wrong. And if I was trying to sell books, what the hell else am I supposed to do with my books? Not sell them? What do you do for a living? You know anything about business? Name someone who's written a book who's not trying to sell it. You're saying, is that supposed to be an insult? It doesn't make any sense. Someone said, will it get better with so many multiracial kids? That's a good question. I think it will go away because more kids are not go away, but it will be lessened when there are more multiracial kids because races are blending a lot more now than they used to. So yeah, people won't be able to kind of use these things the same way when there are so many who are mixing up. There's so much race mixing happening these days. And Mr. Bryan says, where is racism? You may be the problem. I don't know what you mean by that. Definition of racism was changed to exclude people from the act. Yes, it was. That's 100% correct. Can anyone be racist? Anyone can be racist. Racism is a way of belief. It is not limited to one race. It said you can't say that anyone can. I didn't say that. I said anyone can be racist. Racism is not limited to a race. He's only reading IG comments. He's racist towards TikTok. No, I'm reading TikTok comments now. There's no comments on IG. IG is listening to me, but I'm reading TikTok right now because there's more comments over here. SJ, what's going on? Good morning. Two words with two different definitions cannot mean the same thing. That's correct. Yes, they got different definitions. They don't mean the same thing. Not that they can't, they don't. So the question is, Andrew says, I wasn't off topic. You said we would lose a war. I said why we would. You mean black people? Well, black people can't win a race war in America. I've already said this 3 times. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough ammunition. We don't have the leadership. We don't have the organization. So there's no way we can win a war. We don't want a race war in America. Black people do not want a race war in America. All right, if you're anything but white, you don't want a race war in America because white people have overwhelming numbers, and we're not going to win. So every other group, Asians, Latin people, black people, you don't want a race war in America. That will mean your race is going to go away. Your race will cease to exist. So SJ said, dang, what did I walk into? Well, I was talking about racism as a general point. I already went through my points, but now I'm just responding to comments right now. Definition of racism has changed in the last 30 years. Yes, it has. That's my point. I said that earlier. The definition has changed. They keep changing it. And Google, Webster's Dictionary, and many other institutions, they continually change the definitions of words. The jab that many of you took, y'all remember that jab from that virus that was around a couple of years ago? They changed the definition of the V word. I'm not going to say the V word because they've been restricting that on lives. But the V word, they changed the definition of that word from if you get it, that means you will not get a disease. Then they changed it to if you get it, it will lessen the effects of the disease, which makes no sense whatsoever. How do you have the V word, but then you still get the virus? That doesn't make any sense. It didn't make sense right before that virus came around, but now all of a sudden people who got the jab, now they're like, well, good thing I got the V word because now it would have been worse if I didn't get the V word. I'm like, are you serious? Like you're really just going to act like that didn't happen? But anyway, different comment. Why are we speaking about racism? Why not? SJ, what do you want to talk about? All right. So anyway, what book has left the most profound impact on you? All right. My favorite book is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. That's my favorite book. So I would say that one, but I read a lot of books. I've read probably, when I say 1,000, I've read probably close to 1,000 books, but I would say that's my favorite still to this day. The older you are, the more you notice how they change the definitions to fit the current agenda. Yes, and the thing is, they didn't start changing definitions until the internet became, so ubiquitous that people are getting everything from the internet. Because see, let's say even 20 years ago, if you want a definition of a word, you had to pick up a book, and the book is printed, which means you can't just go change what's in a printed book. But on the internet, you can change things very easily. So that's when it started. So anybody who was around before the internet was so normal, a definition stayed a definition because you can't go change a book. But now everybody gets their information through digital formats. Now you can change it. You can change it from Monday to Tuesday. You can change what it says. So this is how a lot of people are getting fooled and bamboozled into thinking things are different than what they are. All right, so I'm gonna answer a couple more comments, then we'll wrap this up. SJ said, I'm more interested in how to become top 2%. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com, SJ. Go to the link in my bio on TikTok, workonyourgameuniversity.com, or you can email me as well, Dre@dreallday.com. I'll happily talk to you about that. Today's topic, though, is about racism. That man said, do I think someone can be prejudiced without being racist? Is there a distinction? I would have to look up the definition of prejudice to answer that question. And right now, I'm not going to do that. But could they be? Well, being that they're two different words, they probably have different meanings, but they are probably connected in some way. But yes, you could be. One Race Alliance says race as relating to people is a man-made construct, is not science, medical, or spiritual based. That's right. There's only one race, the human race. Somebody said I'm racist towards my own race. Some of these N-words ain't got it. LOL. All right, that's funny. All right, so we're going to wrap this up, folks. I'm about to take my son out for a walk and get to the rest of my day. I appreciate everybody's time and attention here on this live. I don't always talk about these things like social issues. Often I'm talking about what SJ said, how to get to the top 2%. So maybe business, maybe mindset, maybe communication, people skills, leadership. I talk about those things as well as every now and then I talk on a social issue. So if you like this one, don't think I'm going to talk about this all the time, but I will every now and then. But I'm really about personal and professional development. But every now and then I step into this to let people know that these things that I talk about on a personal and professional side, they apply when we look at things objectively when it comes to what's happening in the world as well. So that's that, everybody. Work on your game university. That's where our focus is. That's what I do business wise. Everybody have a great day. Work on your game. Got it.